Welcome, everyone, to our March installment of Facts and Faith Friday. I really hope that you've had a blessed week and are enjoying the beautiful spring-like weather, at least in Richmond today. Before we get started, as is our custom, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor F. Todd Gray of Fifth Street Baptist Church to open us up in prayer.
Let us pray. Our Lord and our God, we thank you for today and for the changing of the seasons and the beauty of today. We thank you for this opportunity that you've granted that we might fellowship together like this. We thank you for all those that make this call possible and those who are participants in the call that have given their lives, their time, their talent to helping our folks be healthy and ensuring their well-being, both through cures and comfort. We thank you for our faith leaders on the call and for all they've done over these last 2 years during this pandemic. And we pray that you would open our ears, our minds, our hearts, that we might receive that which would be beneficial to us and help us to minister to our folks and one another. We thank you and claim in advance that which you would do in us and through us, through the gifts that you have given us. In the name of the Master, we pray. Amen.
We also ask that you all continue to keep the people of Ukraine in prayer today and every day until Putin's invasion is done, or this is destroyed. We are so very excited today to talk about the persistent disparities in our financial lives, right? We focus so much during this pandemic on our physical and emotional health, but we've not really highlighted the burdens and impact of this pandemic on the financial health of our communities. And in particular, if you think about it, the disproportionate impact it's had on Black and Brown people. We are so delighted today to have Thea Garen and Andrew Dunn with us today to talk about these persistent disparities on our financial health. But first, I'd like to turn the call over to Dr. Nguyen to provide updates about COVID in the Commonwealth. As many of you all know, we've seen a precipitous drop-off in cases and hospitalizations, which are all great and wonderful things. But there has been some troubling data or news that we've been hearing about an uptick in cases in other parts of the world. So I'm hopeful that Dr. Nguyen can kind of shed some light on what's going on here and elsewhere and what that means for our future. So with that, Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you. We're just going to go through some numbers, as we always have. And I think these numbers will be heartening, but we are going to get to some real talk about why we need to be ever vigilant. Most of you who are following this, and again, most of the information that I get off are 3 sources. We've been naming those sources since the beginning of this pandemic. But one of the sources is the VDH, the Virginia Department of Health COVID page, which I think is that dashboard has been consistently improving as we've gone along. We are over 19,000 people have died in the state from COVID. Dr. Gray, would actually remind me that when we're looking at both Richmond and Henrico, that the numbers we tend to see actually tend to be a little bit worse. If we are actually also looking at the Northern Neck and other things like that, those numbers are still worse. But here's the deal. The trends are good. Remember, only maybe a month or so back, 5 or 6 weeks, we were at a high of, and you all know who joined Facts, Faith, and Friday what this means, that we look at the PCR positivity rate for COVID. And that PCR positivity rate, that 7-day rate, has fallen from a high roughly of 24 to 25%. That means 25%. And we knew what that meant from the CDC, that once you were above 10, it was red alarm. We were, remember at a time at the beginning of COVID, where if we were over 5 to 7%, we were like worried. We're now down as a collective below 4%. We're at 3.6. that looks like that number is still going to trend down. Even in Richmond and in Henrico, the numbers are all below that 5% PCR positivity rate. What that means is that if you go out, you were not back several weeks ago or several months ago, when you went out, you were almost guaranteed somebody was coming down with COVID. What this less than 5% means is that in general, doesn't mean that people can't get COVID, but it's a lot less likely that you'll be able to find people when they congregate who get COVID. I do worry a little bit as we're coming back about things that we're seeing, particularly in Europe. And I'll keep my comments brief because we definitely want to get to our speakers. But remember the first time we were all sitting here and I was like, something's going on in India. Something's going on in England. Will it get here? Well, I worry about two things. I worry about the instability that's actually happening in the Ukraine right now and how that will ultimately contribute. But there are upticks right now and increased hospitalizations in parts of Europe that are giving us all pause and some concern. We will keep our eyes on that, particularly over the next couple of weeks. This is one of the things that we've been, and I use the word, we've been lucky and blessed to actually have Krista Marie Singleton. I think that I've just talked with her, it's probably another needed visit from our CDC person who is at the CDC and has been very generous with her time to share. I think it's time to probably get Krista Marie Singleton back on so that she can actually tell you what trends she's seeing nationally, internationally, and what to watch out for. What I can say is for those who are going back into churches, social distancing, keeping reasonable ventilations, and if you can mask again. But the reality is right now our numbers are not 1%, but it's certainly below 5%. And in most cases, even including Richmond, that's really good numbers. So best way to stay safe, social distance as much as possible, keep things outside if you can, ventilate the churches, make sure that we're cleaning, again, with just regular cleaning things. You don't need too much, any special wipe down surfaces. But if you can wear masks. If not, at least maintain social distancing. And that's the end of this report, unless there are additional questions. I will be making a close watch in Europe, particularly now that this Ukraine thing is going up, about watching the next variant that comes through. As a country, though, we have continued to keep up with getting vaccines and boosters and things like that. So I think we're going to be much better than the other waves we've ever had. But let's just see.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen. I think a lot of us are going into places now and see that very few people are masked. I know in our schools, it's a mixed bag, but I guess at the end of the day, your encouragement is if you have a mask, wear your mask. And if you don't have a mask on, just stay
away.
Stay away. Or go outside, congregate outside. All right.
I will say the following, though, that when it comes to masks, you'll see me you'll see me in a grocery store, you'll see me in places where there's more than 25 people or more. I'm still wearing a mask at this point. However, that becomes optional. So I don't want to put any data out there that this is an absolute. The CDC is making the same things. If you're at high, who should be wearing the mask though? People who are at high risk, people with immunocompromises issues, people with chronic diseases like big diabetes, high blood sugar, high blood pressure. Those people probably ought to continue in your congregation to wear masks. If it were up to me, and I'm not the governor, but I would say that if you have a church where you can kind of validate that everybody's been vaccinated, then I actually think that that's a church that could, given where we are right now, probably have a policy in which, you can have an optional mask. But if you don't know, I still maintain that I just am not comfortable telling you, go out there and do what you want to do, getting on 1960s with it, because I just think that what we're seeing right now in Europe and the upticks are probably exactly because we had a congregation of people without masks, who also weren't vaccinated, who were now congregating and now causing this next variant to sort of uptick. So again, if you were telling me very conservatively, distance, mask, and if you're going to have more than 10 or 25 people congregating in a room, if you had a way of validating whether they were vaccinated and boosted, if you were very comfortable that everybody was vaccinated and boosted, we're much more comfortable with that scenario option, with the exception of if you're immunocompromised or, you know, some of these other diseases. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen. All right, so before introducing our presenters, which again, we're very excited to talk to Andrew and Thea, I'd like to yield the floor to Dr. Tosis to speak about a very exciting and timely funding opportunities for the Facts and Faith pastors, preachers, lay leaders in their congregations. So with that, Dr. Tosis.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure and honor always to be here. And it's interesting because Dr. Brian had asked me if I had a moment to come and do our Don't Be Fooled session today. And initially I had another engagement and that fell off. And so I'm thankful to have an opportunity to at least talk to you guys about this. And hopefully in the future, we'll have another myth buster session for Facts and Faith. But today I wanted to share really quickly about an opportunity that just came about. The Global Medical Grants for Pfizer has just released a request for application, and it is very timely and very relevant to this group. It is basically intended is a request for proposal to address knowledge gaps in testing, diagnosis, and treatment of COVID-19 through education, research, quality improvement, et cetera. And so we have taken on that challenge, myself and Dr. Maria Thompson. Both of us, along with Dr. Brian, are part of the office that is called the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement under the leadership of Dr. Shepard, of course, and her reporting to Dr. Nguyen. So the idea here is that we're going to use, of course, the platform and the knowledge that you guys have built through Facts and Faith Friday, and we would like to engage the churches that participate in Facts and Faith Friday to measure knowledge gaps and, thinking about developing then alongside you guys, developing some materials, enduring collaterals that are grounded in faith and supported by facts. There's a lot of information out there, but we believe that there is an important gap to be fulfilled where, we address our faith community with leaders such as yourselves that are informed by facts. And, I think there's an opportunity for us to fill that gap with you guys. So some of the pastors have already received, and those of you that haven't will be receiving a letter of support that we would love for you to sign to be a part of this, basically stating that you would be happy to support this. We want to be able to provide programs that train folks in the churches to collect the information, that potentially do a train the trainer program, supporting, perhaps using some of the church leaders, like leaders of your health ministries or leaders of your children's ministry, et cetera. We want this to be, powered by and informed by the church community. So we hope that you would sign the letter, those of you that received it. And what I would love is that for the pastors that are on the call today and any other members that would like to sign this letter, I would love for you guys to put your email addresses on the chat so that we can collect them and I can send you the letter to sign through an Adobe document. And I'm also going to put my own email address here so that you can reach out to me directly if you have any other questions or want any additional information. We also will be looking to identify folks from your churches who may be interested in being a part of this with us. So I hope that is helpful. And then we also have one more surprise for you guys. We, you guys have been in existence for a while, and we've been thinking that probably you guys, need a logo. So we took the liberty of developing a couple of mock logos for you guys, and we wanted to share them with you and ask that you vote. So, Facts and Faith Friday, and we came up with the tagline, United in Faith, supported by facts. So Miriam was kind enough to put this poll here. So at your convenience, we ask that you vote for logo number 1, number 2, or number 3. And I don't know if Dr. Nguyen, you want to say a few words about the logos, about your thoughts, and Rudine as well. I would love to, you can talk about sort of the ideas that we're trying to convey through these logos.
And here's the deal. Y'all like none of these logos, y'all can create another one. That's good too.
Absolutely.
Just trying to get the conversation started. The goal here was to really get people across the country and understanding what Facts, Faith, and Fridays is a combination of high tech, obviously with Zoom and some of the other things that we used, but also high touch, that this is mostly about people and about us. And so it's trying to get that across, that Facts and Faith Fridays were here to learn and then to be able to spread the knowledge by multiple means, including technological means. So that's what was added. And so we're hoping that either creatively can come up with something different than this if you don't like this, or at least this is the first plate or an operation of just getting the discussion going.
So
That's
this
it.
is awesome. I just want you to know hosts and panelists can't seem to vote, so I'll let you all know separately which one I like. Thank you so much. And again, to the extent that there are pastors or lay leaders out there who'd like to be in support of this very timely sort of request for application, please either include your email address in the chat or send a note to Dr. Kathy Tosis. And Dr. Tosis, please put your email address in there because some people are calling you out about that right now. Okay, awesome.
Yes, by the way, just quickly that the grant is coming due at the end of this month, so we will need signatures by March 25th. I see that some of you have already signed, so we've already signed. Thank you so much. This is an exciting opportunity. And Dr. Nguyen always tells me not to get attached to these submissions, but I don't write grants and I get them, and I'm very attached to this one. So, and I know Dr. Thompson's in the audience, so that's my aide beaucoup. Like, this is a joint effort. We feel very, very strongly, and we are very motivated to work with and learn from you guys.
So that's because you got a bunch of prayer warriors on your side, so that's how we roll.
Amen. That's what I'm saying, right? I mean, this is done in the bucket.
Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing to support Facts and Faith Fridays, Dr. Tosis. All right, so now the moment you've been waiting for. We are so excited to have Thea and Andrew with us. Thea and Andrew, I'm going to read your bios. I know I'm not going to do them justice, but again, please just indulge me for a moment. You've heard about this millions of times before, but I'm sure that people on our call aren't as familiar with you. So we want to make sure that they know who we're speaking with about persistent disparities in financial health. So first of all, we have Thea Garen. She leads the Financial Health Pulse, a critical research initiative designed to shine a light on the financial lives of people across the United States. In this role, she manages the collection and analysis of survey and transactional data to paint a rich portrait of financial health on a national scale. Before joining the Financial Health Network, Thea worked as a research assistant at the Financial Access Initiative and served as a policy analyst for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, affectionately known as CFPB, overseeing research and producing policy recommendations about savings, credit building, and asset building initiatives. Thea's passion for her work derives from a longstanding commitment to social justice and equity. She holds a master's degree in urban planning from NYU's Robert F. Wagner School of Public Service and graduated magna cum laude from Carleton College with a bachelor's degree in history. Andrew Dunn. As a manager of the Financial Health Network, Andrew Dunn applies a data-centric lens to all aspects of his work. We love data here, Andrew, so we're going to love to hear what you have to say. He takes pleasure in finding new ways to efficiently collect and analyze data. He designs research initiatives, analyzes data, and reports findings for the Financial Health Network's own research efforts. He aids research partners in creating and monitoring impact evaluation efforts and assists consulting clients in measuring financial health accurately. Before joining the network, Andrew worked at nonprofit organizations in the education and social service fields. So he seems to be also supportive of social justice and equity, if I'm reading between the lines here. He attended Cornell University and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Development Sociology. I was too excited there. Anyway, so happy to have both you, Andrew and Thea, and I'll turn it all over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rudine, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Rudine gave us fantastic introductions, but for anybody who missed it, again, my name is Thea Garen. I am a senior director here at the Financial Health Network. I lead the Financial Health Pulse National Research Initiative, which we'll tell you more about in just a moment. I'm joined by my colleague, Andrew Dunn. He is a senior manager here at the Financial Health Network, and he was the primary author of last year's Trends Report, which we'll also tell you more about in a moment. And we are thrilled to be with you here today to share insights about the state of financial health in America during a particularly interesting moment, I would say, in time. Before I begin, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to our hosts at the Virginia Commonwealth University for inviting us here today. Special shout out to Dr. Kathy Tosas for introducing us. Kathy is actually an advisor to our research initiative, and we are so thrilled that she was able to help us make the connection and inviting us again here today to be with you, all of you, this afternoon. So with that, I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about the Financial Health Network Research Initiative, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with us as an organization. Financial Health Network, we are a national nonprofit organization headquartered here in Chicago, where I am, but with offices in New York, Washington, D.C., and with colleagues across the country. And our mission is to improve the financial health of all people in the United States, with our particular emphasis on those who are financially struggling or financially underserved. We view ourselves as a trusted resource for business leaders, for policymakers, innovators. I would also add practitioners, nonprofit initiatives, as well as healthcare providers, employers, really any stakeholders who are committed to improving the financial lives of their customers, clients, employees, and communities. So with that, let me dive into the presentation itself. And over the next few minutes, you will hear me and Andrew talk a lot about this concept of financial health. So at the Financial Health Network, we define financial health as this holistic concept as coming about when one's daily systems help them build resilience and pursue opportunities over time. So you can think of this as a three-part definition intended to capture, again, an individual's financial life, that what one does on a day-to-day basis, how they're able to manage their money, meet their daily financial obligations, either contributes to or detracts from their ability to be resilient in the face of unexpected events and to seize opportunities over time, whether those opportunities be wealth building opportunities such as purchasing a home, paying for that down payment, or sending a child to college, or investing in education or university. So that three-part definition. And in order to, I should also add that financial health, in the definition, it's clearly shaped by an individual's behaviors and attitudes, but it is shaped by far more than just an individual's behaviors and attitudes. Particularly in the United States, financial health is profoundly shaped by systemic forces, both past and present, including the legacy of structural racism and discrimination. So financial health, as we see it, as we measure it, really takes into account some of these structural factors that we as in our various industries are well aware of. In order to measure financial health, and for us as researchers and for the practitioners that we work with to measure, assess, and ultimately improve financial health, we have developed a set of 8 indicators that you can see on your screen. So an individual is financially healthy if they're able to spend less than their income, pay their bills on time, if they have sufficient short and long-term liquid savings and long-term savings, if they have a manageable debt load, a prime credit score, appropriate insurance, and are able to plan ahead financially for their future. And as researchers, again, we can measure financial health collecting survey data, administrative or transactional data. The results that we'll share with you in just a moment from our national study are based on survey data. So they take into account an individual's responses to 8 multiple choice questions fielded through a survey that align with these 8 indicators. And for every individual who responds to 8 of these survey questions, we can calculate an overall financial health score. And we use that score in order to assess financial health trends nationally. So we're spending a few minutes on this definition up front because it is the primary definition. It's the methodology that we use to underscore the results that we're about to share with you. But I'm also sharing it with you all today because this methodology is publicly available, and we encourage the many stakeholders that we work with that I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation to use this framework, to use these survey questions, to use this holistic definition of financial health to assess, track, and improve the financial health of their customers, their clients, their employees, in your case, potentially patients in the healthcare realm, or those that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So that was a lot of background. I did go through it quickly because I am eager to get to the results that we are eager to share with you today. So with that, we will turn to our discussion. And, I mentioned this in the beginning of the call, and I thought Rudine did a really nice job of contextualizing the moment that we find ourselves in. There is a lot going on in our world today. On one hand, there is lots to celebrate. As Dr. Nguyen shared, the COVID numbers are looking promising, at least at the moment. We are hopefully in the later stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses, certainly where I am, hopefully where you are as well, have reopened if they closed in the first place. National employment trends are quite positive. Employment is high. And over the past year, wages have increased in real terms for the first time in decades. On the other hand, inflation is at an all-time high at the current moment. Gas prices are surging. And we see that deep disparities in financial health have remained. And really, the world looks more uncertain than ever. So it is an interesting time to be measuring financial health and talking about some of these financial health trends. And our latest financial health trends report sheds light on some of these interesting dynamics with data that we actually collected in April of last year. So the survey that we fielded, the results that we are about to share with you are based on this survey fielded to members of the University of Southern California's online consumer panels. This is a nationally representative group of individuals who have opted in and consent to participate to surveys on a regular basis. We had nearly 6,000 individuals who responded to this survey. Individuals or respondents could choose to complete the survey in either English or Spanish. And the sample who responded to the survey, these 6,000 individuals, is indeed a nationally representative sample. So the demographic breakdown in terms of income, education, race and ethnicity, and gender, the population in our survey sample mirrors that of the United States. So again, the results are nationally representative. At the current moment, we are gearing up to field our next annual survey. So this would be the 2022 annual survey, and would encourage all of you to stay tuned to see some slightly more current, up-to-date results. Again, these results that we're about to share with you are based on April of last year, but should give you, I think, a decent understanding of financial health trends nationally. So, oops. Advanced too quickly. With that, I promise we are at the discussion portion of our conversation. And I'd love to bring Andrew in at this point. Andrew, I'm hoping you can begin by sharing a little bit about what we learned at the highest level about the state of financial health in the United States that we highlighted in last year's 2021 Trends Report.
Definitely. Thank you, Thea. And the one other thing I'll add is that if you have questions or comments, feel free to add them in the chat or hold on to them till the end, because I'm really interested in your feedback and reactions to these findings. So what we learned in our most recent trends report was that 2/3 of people in the United States are not financially healthy. So based on those 8 indicators that Thea shared. We yield a financial health score, and we can categorize people into 3 different categories: financially healthy, financially coping, and financially vulnerable. And we find that 1/3 of people are financially healthy, meaning that they're generally doing well in most dimensions of financial health. But that means that nearly 2/3 are not financially healthy and may be struggling. So we think about financial health as falling into people's abilities to spend, save, borrow, or plan in a way that allows them to be resilient and seize opportunities over time. And that means approximately 166 million people, if you extrapolate our survey results to the entire US population, are not financially healthy. And for our audience at Financial Health Network, that means that there's a really big chunk of the population that still needs their support to improve their financial health, to get them to a place where they can conduct all those financial behaviors in a positive and in a financially healthy way.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And then moving along, what did you find to be most surprising from last year's trends report, digging a little bit deeper, going beyond these national figures?
So, so the one thing I should share also is that we've been conducting this research for 4 years, are entering our 5th year to do this. So we fielded this survey and a lot of the same questions year over year, which allows us to compare the financial health of the entire US in 2021 to past years. And it was kind of surprising to see that financial health improved incrementally in 2021 versus 2020. And again, this is during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so these results definitely surprised us that during the COVID-19 pandemic, again, at the US national level, about 1/3 of people are financially healthy. But it does reflect a little bit of a trend that we saw. There was an increase between 2019 and 2020 as the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting the US. And so it's not, in that light, it's not necessarily surprising that the increases would continue. But we did also see that there were 2 big contributors in 2021. The first was that there were changes in personal financial behavior. Some of this was due to COVID-19 lockdowns, and some of this was people's own decisions that basically they were not going out and spending money in all of the in-person stores that they might otherwise do. And 2, we found that government interventions in the form of stimulus payments, expanded unemployment insurance, some forms of debt relief really helped those recipients and helped them keep their financial health from declining. So it's those are the 2 contributors. And if we look a little bit deeper, I think as we'll share in a second, we see that there were some other improvements at the demographic level.
Indeed. So let's head there next. And at this point, we stayed with those national figures, but we all know how important it is to disaggregate the data, to look beyond those averages, the national figures, to truly understand what's happening. So what did we see, Andrew, when we disaggregated the data?
So we saw improvements across race and ethnicity categories and income. And again, this was kind of surprising. So as of April 2021, we saw the proportion of Asian American people considered financially healthy increased by 11 percentage points. The proportion of financially healthy Black people increased by 9 percentage points. And for Latinx people, that was an increase of 4 percentage points. And for people with household income under $30,000, there was an increase of 2 percentage points in the proportion considered financially healthy. Thinking back to those indicators that Thea shared, we saw the areas of improvement being in a greater proportion of people reporting that they can pay their bills on time and in full, that they had sufficient short-term savings, and in their self-assessment of their credit scores. So those were all areas that were most directly impacted by government interventions and, as I mentioned, those changes in personal financial behavior that led to these improvements in financial health. And I should also add the caveat that we're we're focused on financial health, and that's not to that's one particular dimension of people's lives, and that's not to say that the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic was positive for anyone, particularly demographic groups that you see on the screen. But that was kind of what the findings shared, and we think that the changes in personal financial behavior, as well as the government interventions, allowed people to experience some improvement at the aggregate level in these dimensions. And so these are big increases, and they're powerful, and they show the impact that these policies can have. But it's also important to note that just because there are improvements doesn't mean that the disparities in financial health or the gaps in financial health have necessarily closed.
And we also don't know if these trends are momentary blips in time, again, on the heels of some of these government relief measures and business closures, or if they're long-term trends. And so that's exactly why we're heading back into the field in just a couple of weeks to reassess the state of financial health nationally and for different groups. But going back to the findings of last year's report, Andrew, we clearly saw some positive trends, some surprising trends, things to hopefully be optimistic about. But we also saw things that were not so positive. So hoping you can share some insights about those findings as well.
So I mentioned that we've been doing this research for 4 years, or by the time we fielded, or these results are from our 4th year. And there are some things that are pretty consistent, which is that there are financial health gaps between white individuals and people who are Black or Latinx. And so those differences didn't change. Those gaps still existed even despite those improvements that we saw in the past slide. And we see that people with lower household income still dramatically trail people with much higher incomes. And again, the improvements we saw in the past year haven't changed the overall pattern significantly. And so that's an area of emphasis for us that we want to continue to focus on and track, basically. And so I've been talking about race and ethnicity and income. I actually want to turn to gender. If we go to the next slide, and an additional finding that I think also received a lot of kind of publicity during the pandemic was that there was a gender gap in financial health. And we saw that actually increased during the pandemic. So the financial health of men improved significantly, while it stayed relatively flat for women. And so it might not be surprising, unfortunately, but it's still sobering to see in our data. When we were doing the research, we saw that childcare appeared to be something that disproportionately affected women during the pandemic. They were twice as likely as men to not work due to childcare responsibilities in 2021. And women who reported being caregivers were more likely to experience financial stress as well. And so this is another area where there were existing gaps heading into the pandemic, but they got exacerbated or even broadened during the pandemic as well.
Indeed. So potentially another cause for concern, something certainly to track over time. And the Financial Health Network is actually releasing a deep dive on the financial health, the economic realities of women. So I would encourage you all to stay tuned for that research report as well. So Andrew, I think my final substantive question for you is, at this point, we have been talking a lot about insights and findings from our nationally representative 2021 survey data set. But as you've alluded to, we have fielded this survey for multiple years, and we actually have a nice cohort of individuals, roughly 3,000 individuals who have responded to the survey every year for the last 4 years, giving us a nice longitudinal data set to work with as well. And so I'm hoping you can share some insights about what we saw analyzing that longitudinal data set, specifically looking at how the financial health of these individuals changed over time, not just the aggregate or average figures.
Yeah, that's right. So what we can do, and kind of the data you see presented on this slide, is that we can look at the survey responses for an individual in 2020, and then that same individual's survey responses in 2021, and look at how their financial health changed and kind of what else happened in their life that might be associated with those changes. So, I shared that financial health actually improved between 20 and 2021, but it's important to remember that there are actually 43% of people who experienced a decline in their financial health. So those aggregate trends mask a lot of movement at the individual level. And then what you see presented in this graph is that 10% of people moved to a lower financial health tier. So again, according to our FinHealth score methodology, they moved from being financially healthy to being coping or vulnerable, or they moved from being financially coping to financially vulnerable. And that's what this diagram kind of shows, is the movement between those tiers. When we looked at people who had declines in their financial health, we saw that they were people with disabilities, with low to moderate incomes, or who had less than a bachelor's degree. Those are the people more likely to experience a decline. And then we also saw that employment disruptions were really correlated with financial health. So, we know there was a lot of that during the pandemic, people being furloughed or laid off, and people who had their employment disrupted or who actually took time off to tend to a serious illness in their household were more likely to experience a decline in their financial health. Again, I'll just kind of connect to something I said earlier in the presentation, which is that we saw that government interventions were pretty effective in helping people weather that instability. But kind of to the point that you alluded to earlier, Thea, a lot of those government interventions have ended and come off the books. So that's something that we're really going to be tracking carefully to see if what changes in financial health arise in 2020 as a result of that.
Exactly. And we look forward to sharing updated insights with you all, hopefully in some way or the other. So this was the conversation, the discussion that we prepared for all of you, the data that we shared. We have a wealth of data, but that we did not present, but we were hoping to keep this presentation relatively short and tight to leave plenty of time for questions. And it looks like we did get a couple of questions. So let us tackle those in just a moment. Before we wrap up with the slides, I did want to share a couple of links with you all. The first link in purple on this slide is to access all of these materials, the trends report that Andrew has been sharing, as well as a wealth of other data and reports. You can also find more about the financial health score methodology using that link. And if this sounds like something you all would be interested in using in your own professions with customers, clients, communities, and employees, again, it is completely freely available, open source, and we encourage you all to use that methodology. I also included on this slide my email address as well as Andrew's. We would love to continue the discussion with all of you after this, and so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. With that, Andrew, we did receive a couple of questions, so I'm assuming, unless anybody tells me otherwise, we have a few moments to tackle those. Andrew, I'd love for you we've got a couple of related questions about regional differences, South versus North, as well as differences that we may have observed, rural versus urban. Would love for you to tackle that in just a moment. But we also received a question from Dr. Tosis on how our sample was chosen. Was it a probabilistic sample? So let me tackle that one first, and then we'll go to the regional differences. And indeed, we are leveraging a probability-based sample for this survey. So what that means, I mentioned that we work through the University of Southern California's Standing Consumer Panel. Again, these are a group of individuals who have consented to respond to surveys on an ongoing basis. They are paid incentives for their responses to these surveys. That group of panelists was selected and continues to be selected using a probability-based approach. So what that means is that the University of Southern California, their recruiters start with a list of all of the addresses of households in the entire country. They randomly select then a subsample of individuals from that list. They invite them to respond. For those individuals who do not have a Wi-Fi connection at home, they all offer Wi-Fi enabled tablets. So using this type of a random selection model, they are able to ensure national representation, again, across those demographics that I mentioned, but also avoid any sort of bias as much as possible to try to overcome simply, targeting households who would just opt into samples, which is more of that convenient sample. So again, to say this in layman's terms, the sample is as rigorous as it can be and as representative of different populations, individuals, attitudes, preferences as is possible. With that, Andrew, let me turn to you to share any insights that we found from this research or other research we've done about this question of geographic differences.
Yeah, good question. You don't have a slide for this, but you actually find it in our most recent report. We did a cut by the census region categories. So that's Northeast, Midwest, South, and West. We saw that the Northeast and Midwest were the most financially healthy, and then the South and West were slightly less financially healthy by comparison. So I'd encourage you to check out the report for the details, because that'll be a lot easier than me kind of reading that verbally. I think the one thing I'll say is that the regions are really big areas, so that masks a lot of state level differences, policy differences. We thought about looking at COVID-19 policies by region, but they differ so much between states. So that's just the one caveat about doing this type of analysis.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask
go
a
ahead.
question. Apologies. Let me put my video on because I think it's so weird when people ask questions and you can't see them. First of all, thank you so much for sharing, your report. This is really fascinating information, but I think a couple of our attendees are probably asking themselves, okay, so where do we go from here, right? I mean, what should we be doing with these findings? Some of this stuff is not necessarily new to us in the sense that we are very well aware of structural racism and how it impacts certain demographics and how we sort of build or are limited in building generational wealth, right? So again, what can we do with this? And now that we're armed with this data, what can we do with it?
I'm happy to jump in and tackle that first and then let Andrew jump in. So, I mean, one finding from our research that came out loud and clear, and I think Andrew did an excellent job articulating this, is that we now have irrefutable proof that government social policies work, right? They work to provide individuals with a safety net. They work to help individuals build a financial cushion. So again and again, we saw after those stimulus payments, certainly we've done other research on the child tax credits, the student loan payment moratorium, the housing eviction. All of these policies, both individually and collectively, contributed to many of those gains that we saw, right? That Andrew called out as being surprising. And so, I don't think you have as many folks that work directly in government on this call, but for those of us who can advocate on behalf of financially vulnerable consumers, individuals, the fact that we now know that these government policies do have a tangible, measurable, positive impact on individuals' financial health and may actually, as we've been suggesting, go further in reducing the racial wealth gap, the gender wealth gap, less so that in our research, but I think that's a powerful conclusion. From more of a practitioner or an individual standpoint, our primary audience at the Financial Health Network is financial service providers, banks, credit unions, fintechs, nonprofit practitioners. And so we have spent a lot of time working directly with those entities to coach them, frankly, on how to design better, more affordable financial products and services and to actually make the business case to those entities that doing so is a good business move, right? It helps in the long term. Rudine, I don't want to dodge your question, but I actually might put it back on your team to help us think through for this particular audience, knowing, who you all work with, to help us think through, what you all see as implications or takeaways for both the faith-based as well as the healthcare community. I have a couple other thoughts I can add, but I'd be curious if you had any initial reactions or anyone on your team had any reactions.
So this is probably more of a question, but I've been hearing a lot about how the housing market is so hot right now, and that people, who, I know they're first time home buyers who are really, really interested in buying homes, but even standing in hand with a mortgage, they're approved for whatever amount of money, even a premium to what the cost of the home is. A lot of these first-time home buyers, which are disproportionately people of color, aren't able to get, in line, right? Because they're competing against cash offers, right? So I guess when you're advising these financial institutions and trying to design programs that would maybe sort of benefit, people of color, I just worry that what they're offering is not enough to sort of satisfy what the market is looking for, particularly when we're talking about purchasing a home. So again, that's not really answering your question either, but it's something that really sort of bothers me when I'm thinking about, our congregations.
It is my personal belief that to really rectify some of these disparities that we observe in the data that that you all observe with the folks that you work with and that we know have been around for generations, it is my personal belief that no amount of tweaking on the margins in terms of financial products and services is going to get us there. I think that will help at the margins, but I do think that systemic government policy, and there's a slew of policies, some of which we've touched on. We touched more on the ones related to COVID relief, but many that we have not touched on, whether they be baby bonds that really do help with the building of wealth and assets at a young age, whether it's student loan forgiveness, whether it's comprehensive paid leave, affordable childcare. It is my personal belief that those types of systemic policies are what's necessary to really shift these trends beyond some of these changes that we just reported on that we see at the margins. Andrew, what would you add to that? Nothing.
I think you covered it.
From a healthcare, standpoint, healthcare is a much newer field that many of our colleagues are working on and leading the charge there. And Dr. Tosis has really helped us in, advancing our thinking. And we didn't really present any data on the connection between financial health and physical health. But we have seen in our data, you all as practitioners have seen probably much more intimately than we have, that strong link between one's financial health, one's physical health, and how the two are intertwined and reinforce each other, or can complicate, the dynamics can complicate each other. And so it's certainly an area that we are actively thinking about how we as the financial health network try to work with healthcare providers to support individuals' financial health while also ensuring their physical health.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this won't be your last time with us. I'm taking to heart some of the things that you shared with us, and just thinking about how we as a community can, take this information and do things in our own sphere to make, things better for our community. So again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So with that, thank you. With that, I think we're almost out of time for this Facts and Faith Friday call. Please let us know your thoughts and suggestions about future topics. I think we touched upon a couple that we think that we're going to speak to, including having CDC Kristen Marie Singleton back, and also thinking more about what we could talk about in terms of financial health and well-being. The one thing I'd point out to you all is that there is a Women in Wellness, a VCU Massey educational conference that's being held next Saturday, March 26th from 8 to 3. It's in person and there are also virtual options. We are going to put the information about that Women in Wellness Conference. So you can go ahead and sort of share that with your congregations and hopefully that you'll be able to attend. I see that there might be a winner for the logo, at least as of right now, because remember all the hosts and panelists didn't get a chance to vote on it because we were blocked out of doing that. But Dr. Tosis, do you want to tell us who the winner is? Oh, Dr. Tosis texted me. It's oh, there you go. Number 2, purple. There you go.
Yeah,
look at that. It's like, wow, that's pretty good.
yeah.
Overwhelming majority there. We still got to look at the numbers though. We got to look at the numbers. So Dr. Nguyen or Dr. Tosis, do you have anything else, Pastor Gray, before we sort of turn it over?
As always, thank you. And I really am glad to be again seeing everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Thea and Andrew, for being here. And with that, Pastor Ross, would you mind closing us out in prayer?
Yes. Let us bow. Oh, gracious God, who have blessed us on this journey, who have kept us from seen and unseen dangers, who has been with us in the midst of the storm, in the valleys, and even in the mountains. We thank you now for this pause, dear Lord, and refreshing knowledge and strength. Be with us now, link us together by thy Spirit, that we may walk and go forth under thy care. Thank you now for one another and just the blessed presence of sharing your grace and goodness together. Keep us now while we're absent one from another. We pray indeed for thy name's sake. Amen.